Hello, good afternoon. And it's really lovely that you're able to join us. And if we saw you at the recent AGM as well, how nice that you've popped in to continue this conversation that we're having around monitoring, evaluating your service. So I think what I'll do is back up originally to say just a sentence about myself, because some people might say, well, who is this woman that keeps popping up on the training with Aisling? My name is Di, as you know, Di West, and basically I've been working in the voluntary sector for the last 30 odd years and been an independent consultant and trainer and an associate in Irish in Britain for at least the last 10, I'm sure. And basically what I've done in the past is I've run lots of different types of organisations and been part of committees of different sizes. And that's given me the opportunity to learn from the ground upwards, really, about what it's like to run organisations, a wide range of different organisations. I've run both a council for voluntary service type organisation for about 5 years, as well as a community centre, as well as a much more hands-on practical service, which was counselling for young people and temporarily a women's refuge. So I've got kind of a diverse range of experience. And so I'm not coming in with a very particular view, but of a broad view of measuring a wide range of services. So this afternoon then, Aisling's going to take you on to our next slide, which is going to say an overview and an introduction about what we hope you're going to get from the session this afternoon. We're hoping to look at the very basics of what you might want to put in place. So, but although I say that, you may be an organisation that just wants to come for a bit of inspiration. You might be running for a while, and indeed you might be a small to medium-sized organisation already quite experienced at running your service, but you might be thinking, oh, maybe I just need to talk and just get some outside influence around thinking about what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I am going to go from the bottom up. So for those of you that know quite a lot about this subject area already, just put some stuff into the chat box for us about particular questions, and I'll try and cater for a range of audience. We're going to be looking at the methods of measurement today, and we're going to look at the kind of real basics, and we're going to look at some of the surrounding issues around that. And we're also going to be looking at some of the pros and cons involved in doing some of the monitoring of your service provision. And we're going to look at a wide range of services. So please do bring your own service in so that we can focus and use that maybe as an example. We're also going to be focusing on the outcomes, like where are we going with this? Because that's really the key significant factor in that we need to start where we want to end rather than where we want to start, if that makes sense. And this will become quite obvious in the next couple of slides. We also want to help you to develop an action plan moving forward. So give you some ideas to go away with to say, right, okay, what do I need to do next? So we have some quite clear expectations about what we hope you're going to get from this afternoon. And the next one, please. Okay, so before we do anything at all, we're going to look at our organisation. We're going to say, why do we exist? And the reason why I do that is because many of you are already registered as charities, and all of your work will need to actually fit in with what would be your aims or your reason for being and why we're here. We've got to be always fitting our services into why, what are we trying to achieve? And that's usually broken down into two different areas. It's going to be your aims, which is the things that you strive to do over time. And so that will be a sentence probably that says, if you were a youth organisation here in Lambeth, where I'm living in London, you might say, we're a youth organisation hoping to help young people between the age of 18 and 25 fulfil their potential now, or improve their quality of life living in the London Borough of Lambeth. So our aims are always going to be things that we're never quite getting there. It's something we strive to do. Okay, and often the words we would use to describe that is the list you can see in front of you, which is to improve something or increase something. And the next bit. So what follows along from that is how we're going to do that. So we may exist to support young people and help them fulfill their potential, but we might be doing it in a particular way. So we might be saying to offer educational services, to offer social skills or employment skills, or helping them to do interviews. Now, the reason why we need to actually boil this down and to be clear, we want to be really crystal clear about how our services are helping us to achieve our organisational aims. It must fit within that, because otherwise what happens is we start to develop services that work outside of our remit, outside of our constitution, and head off in a different direction, which is a common problem. It can happen, and is something that often happens when organisations have been going over a longer period of time. So that's the reason why I start this particular seminar talking about the aims and objectives and reminding us about why we exist and how we're going to offer the services. The other thing about objectives and the difference between them is that the objectives of the organisation may change. So topically, we might get, there's a time where there's funding around things like employment and skills for employment and helping those young people learn how interview skills or CV skills. And so the objectives may change over time and you may have themes, whereas the aims of the organisation should never change until they're fulfilled, or never fulfilled, in which case organisations run on. Please do put some questions in the chat box as we go along, and I'm going to ask Aisling to go along to the next slide. So I've just given you examples there of sentences about how your organisation is going to describe your definition of objectives. So it might be providing a range of workshops, information, etc., etc. And the next one, please. So when we're talking about, again, we're going from the top down now, we're talking about what our organisations are existing to do. We're saying how we're going to do it. And then we're trying to say, do we understand our current climate of fundraising? So these are the core bits in place. Before we even get to the topic of monitoring and evaluation, we're needing to actually understand these other contexts. And that's why I've put them in here today. So basically, there are a whole range of different funders out there. If you're looking at grants and trusts and foundation funding, and over the years, they fund organisations in a range of different ways. And this is a summary for you of the different ways that they fund organisations. So the funding of an organisation in this context of this slide is saying they like the look of you, and they say, oh, we like this organisation. It sounds like it's doing great things, and we will just fund it because we like what it does in its aims and objectives. Okay. Then there was a time where people were funding a worker, and they would say, we might need a worker to work with these young people between 18 and 25, and they would fund a particular post. Whereas time moved on, and we then had that funders were going to fund a particular project. Now, with each of these different areas, you're going to monitor it slightly differently, potentially, to fulfill those funders' agreements and the things. If you were to manage to secure that funding, there might be different ways that they would want you to measure and monitor and evaluate. So the reason why I'm breaking this all down is so that it helps equip you to look for the funding that you need and be able to actually bring your monitoring and evaluation in line. So time went on, funders were then happy to fund particular parts of services, and also there was even some funders that were able to fund what we call the core of the organisation, which is helping the middle of the donut of the organisation. So the bit in the middle, which is all the kind of staffing and the rent and the heating and the light and all those kind of insurance and things that people don't often pay, which we now call the core, there are funders that will do that too. But again, the monitoring would be different of that type of fund. More recently, I'd say in the last 5 years, funders want to fund the changes for the community and the changes for the people that are using your services. And this is where monitoring evaluation has come into play in a much bigger way. And so in a way, I'm trying to paint with a picture for you of the context of the way the organisations secure their funding and how it's developed that we have to actually become quite agile in the way that we monitor. Aisling, do you have any chats or comments or questions?
We do actually, Di. Firstly, there was just something about, I know you're saying that the objectives can change, and sometimes this happens organically. So we've had organisations that would say, set up a lunch club to reduce isolation, but in that they find themselves helping with benefit forms and helping with welfare, and that sort of grows organically. So I think the question was that wouldn't change the aims of the organisation, but that might change the objectives going forward, or how would that?
Right. So that's a really interesting example, because when I hear that, if it was a lunch club for older people, I would say the aim of that particular organisation is not to provide the lunch club, but to actually support older people living a more qualitative, active life in the
Sure.
community.
Yeah,
And the lunch club, I'd say, was an objective,
sure. Okay,
of
perfect.
which there might be many. So I would probably phrase that the organisation, and this is exactly the kind of question I was hoping would come up, because sometimes it's just the way we're thinking of things. So you might say that organisation exists to support people living a long, healthy, active life,
Mm.
and or improve the quality of life of those people living in X through lunch club, benefit advice, information, signposting.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Perfect.
So in
Yeah.
a way, we've stepped up and been a bit more strategic about our longer term aim in that context. Please do welcome any of those coming along. So, if you've got questions that you've got saying, actually, it's got me thinking about, when I used to run a community centre, for example, when I first arrived, the trustees felt that the aim of the organisation was to run a community centre. And actually, it wasn't. It was to improve the quality of lives of the people living in Northwest 6,
Yeah.
living or working in that area through the provision of the community centre, after school clubs for children.
Yeah.
Because we also branched out and didn't do things just in the centre. We became quite active in the community in the surrounding area,
Yeah.
using the library and the schools. So suddenly, it's not about community centres, it's about the community.
Yeah, fantastic. And just one more, Di, if we just got a bit of space. Somebody's just asked if we will touch on how objectives relate to outcomes and if there'll be any suggestions on wording or how to approach expressing those.
Yes. Yeah. So as I'm going along, please do tell me if you get this at the end. So what I'm going to use is I'll carry on in the style that we are. So what I'm doing is giving you examples, but do feed in your particular organisation, and we'll protect your identity, but we will use that as examples to enable to make this more worthwhile for you by giving you that wording as we go along. Okay, next slide, please, Ashley.
Oh, sorry, just bear with me for 1 second.
This context for fundraising and the climate is really important, because often what I find is that we sometimes feel that one blanket will fit all. We get an application, we want to apply to several funders, but actually the way that they work is that they will be clear about the way that they want to fund different organisations. So it's just about reading their criteria in order to actually match up what you're doing, in order to feel that you're going to, have the best chance possible. Okay, let's look at some jargon then. Let's look at some of the basics. Beneficiary is something that's used. This also helps with fundraising. All of our seminars are interchangeable. They all kind of cross over and help you improve the way that you're running your organisation. And so you might find some things repeat and some things pop up in a similar way. So beneficiaries, we have beneficiaries that are the people that we're working with, but we also then have secondary beneficiaries who are the people that are attached to those people. So if we're running the lunch club and we are having a dozen people coming in to sit and have lunch with us, what we're also doing is improving the lives of another 4 people. Because when those people go home, having been with you and felt really good about coming, they're going to be in a better mood, they're going to feel happier, and they're going to be much more kind of engaged and enthused when they go home, which is going to improve their life at home as well as with you. And so when we're looking at our monitoring, we need to bear in mind, and we're not selling ourselves short by saying, we're not only working with the people that are in front of us, but we're working with the people that are surrounding those people. So if you're working with children, it's the family. If you're working with an older person, it might be their family, their children and their grandchildren that they're working with. So, do remember when you're counting the numbers side of things, that your numbers can be the direct beneficiary as well as the indirect beneficiaries. Okay. Direct is also another term. Some people might say to you, what are your primary beneficiaries? This all gets a little bit wordy. You may or may not, but beneficiary is the most common, so I'd use that one. Direct and indirect is all the ones that we've just been describing. Okay, milestones. Sometimes people talk about milestones of your project when you're planning it out, and the milestones are they're the sequential things that happen, that the project wouldn't be the same or wouldn't be able to exist unless they were in place. So if we're setting up a lunch club for volunteers that are going to run it, and we don't recruit any volunteers, your main milestone there is to recruit the volunteers or get some money in the first place in order to, all those things are going to be sequential. But the milestone will be, for example, recruitment of volunteers, finding a venue. They're all things that you actually have to do. So when somebody asks you about the milestones of the planning of your project, that's going to be the things that have to be in place. Okay. Qualitative indicators, okay, and quantitative. These are 2 things that you might come across quite often. An indicator, a quantitative one, she says. I'm stumbling over my words today. I think I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to have a quick drink. So the quantitative indicators are all the numbers, and they're harder indicators. So it's going to say, right, okay, we're going to run 1 lunch club a week for up to 12 people over 42 weeks of the year. Okay, that's an illustration of your quantity indicators for that lunch club. The qualitative indicators are going to be the softer ones. We're going to improve the way people feel, or we're going to help them become more physically active. If we run a walking group around the area and doing historical talks or bench to bench walk, we're hoping to increase their activity and increase their physical fitness. That's an example of a good quantitative indicator. And when we add on the 4 or 5 people at a time, and we're going to do 3 walks over 12 weeks, that's the quantitative side coming in. I know that sounds a bit wordy. I'm sure Ashley will correct me if I get it wrong. But these are quite key for your projects, both when you're talking about them to your funders, but also when you're tying them to your objectives. So if you're about improving the quality of life of older people over the age of 65 living in Huxley, and you say, we want to improve the quality of life by, so you might say, increasing their physical activity, enabling them to stay longer in the community, live an active or independent life. Those are all soft outcomes for your projects. So when we're describing an outcome that's a soft outcome, it's about a feeling or about a physical difference that people might want to report to you, which is very different to your numbers and your number indicators of how many people over how many weeks or how many hours. Now, that's a key one, actually. One of the things that we do sometimes is that we are working with the same people quite intensively, and that makes it quite hard sometimes to sell that particular service to different funders. And what I would definitely say is that we need to look at the way that we use those number indicators, because we could say we're working with the same group of 12 people, they come to my lunch club, and we're running the lunch club once a week, 40 weeks a year. But we also then have volunteers that do one-to-one with each one of those people and spend another 10 contact hours a week with each of those people over the first 3 weeks or something. So even though you'd be saying we work with 12 people, people go, oh, you only work with 12 people or 5 people, or yeah, but you might be spending up to 10 to 15 hours of contact time with each of those people, which results in the impact that you make for those people in achieving your outcomes of your organization, which is improving the quality of life of those people. Oh my gosh, that's getting quite wordy, isn't it? Any questions, Ashley?
I'll just have a quick look there, Di.
That went a bit deep dive, I think.
No questions. Probably just processing that for now. We'll probably get
Yeah, I'm
in a short while.
I'm sure. Right, yeah. So this is what this is all about today. So we'll get on to talk about how we deliver that and how we measure it. But it's so key that we're actually heading in the right direction. We're saying our organization is about this. This is what we exist to do. These are the changes we want to make. These are the outcomes we're trying to make for the people that come to us before we even go anywhere near our monitoring. Okay, evidence of need, that's another key one there about jargon. What people mean by evidence of need is we have set up our organisation to do whatever changes that you feel that is needed in your community. We are needing to collect all the time the reason why we've decided to run this service or this organisation. We need the evidence. We need very hard and fast, concrete evidence that the community around us are telling us that the needs that we're trying to deliver are the ones that they want. Because if they don't need us, why are we here? In a nutshell. So, evidence of need is about the proof and about collection of information in order to concretely have that cycle of affirmation that your service is needed and wanted by your community. And if that's the case, then it makes it easier to fund you. It's as simple as that. Okay.
Just on that, Di,
Yeah.
you might go into it. Does that have to be things like commissioned research or needs analysis, or because I know you said concrete, can that be as simple as, John, Stephen and Maureen have said that when they come to, the community centre and they do our yoga, that it benefits them and they feel better and more part of a community? I mean, I suppose that's the soft versus the hard, but evidence of need, is that enough evidence of need if captured properly?
All of this, right? So this is how these are all the kind of, I suppose we're laying out our stall for the reasons why we do what we do, making sure we keep on track doing what we do and then we're going to get on to how we actually deliver that. Yeah, but the evidence of need has to be in there, because that helps you to tell the funders, for example, and demonstrate that you've been running for this amount of time, you know, you've had these amount of people coming through your doors. If you're not able to articulate those things, not only are you doing yourself down, but you're also not being able to demonstrate in concrete terms to your funder that your service is needed. In the old days, Ashley, we used to be able to say to funders, I've been doing this for 20 years and I can tell you that this is what's needed.
Yeah.
And no longer can we actually, we have to get the evidence from the people we're serving. And so that has to be delivered in a range of ways, which include all the indicators that we've been talking about.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks.
And it's collected as we go. So this is what we're here to do this afternoon, is to look at how we can do that leanly without kind of too much expense, without, you know, big fandangoed systems in place, unless you've got the money and the resources to throw at it, which is lovely. We're doing it on a shoestring here today. So we're going from the common denominator of small organisations that I'm assuming would not have the resources in order to do that. Yeah. Okay. So there you got on the bottom there, the most kind of up-to-date ones that are used. I suppose the most recent is the inputs, outputs, outcomes and impact. And I'm going to break those down for you very quickly. So the inputs then are the things that you put into making something happen. So you may put getting our lunch club again as an example. You will put some volunteers into making that happen. You might put some food because you're going to make a lunch. You're going to have a venue. These are the tangible, concrete things, are the inputs. Okay. The output then is what is delivered by those things coming together. So the output is one lunch club a week over, 42 weeks of the year, over 2 hours or whatever your lunch club time is. The outputs are not the outcomes. So the output is just what happens. And this is where a lot of people get confused. So when funders and different things happen, people often get confused about an output and an outcome. So they'll be putting down, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. But that doesn't tell you what that achieves. It just tells you what you're delivering. So if we had our lunch club and we just have everyone come together and they have a lovely old time and they come together year on year, and you're working with probably 30 odd people, 12 come at any one time, they dip in and out maybe, as people do, but you've known some of those people for years and years and years and years and years, and you know you've made a difference. But the difference, if I was to say to you, what does your lunch club do? And you say to me, well, we've been running it for the last 15 years, doesn't tell me what change it makes for those people. It just tells me that's what's happening. Does that make sense? So the outcome then is the change for the person in the life of the person as a result of having come to you. And it's measuring that change is what we're going to be talking about today. The impact and how that differs from the outcome. The impact is a longer term change for the wider community, is usually how that's referenced. So, for example, the person coming to the lunch club, the input is the volunteers, the venue and the food. The output is 42 or 50 lunch clubs a year, 3 hours a day for up to 20 people. The outcome is more active, healthy people, greater social connection, improved friendships and feeling of the community, stronger communities. Yeah. So the longer term impact is that people live longer and happier in that community. And the overall community benefit is that it's a stronger community, a well-connected and integrated community over that time as a contribution of that lunch club over the years. Can you hear the difference? Is there a difference?
I think so. So is it the outcome is I suppose collectively or groups or individuals um as a direct result, and then impact I suppose would be the broader community and the longer term is how I receive that. But please do post in the chat. Oh, we've got something come through there. Yes, someone said that's really helpful, a really helpful breakdown.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on some of how we're going to measure some of those things for our direct beneficiaries now that we've discussed all of that context. So if some of you are sitting there saying, is she going to get onto the monitoring and the measures? Yes, we are. But we needed to do all of that first. And the next slide, please. Come on, Aisling.
There we go. No
There you
pressure.
go. Right. So you've got your beneficiary outcomes then. So we're focusing on that individual. And as a rule of thumb, the bigger money you get, just generally speaking, the bigger context you're going to have to give. So if you get a funder saying we're going to give you a small amount of money, then they might ask for the changes for the individual person using the service. And you could also collect just in case you want to, when you want to be thinking of doing bigger bids down the line. You might want to set into play a monitoring system that is also going to collect the changes for the family around them, changes for the wider community along the way, so that you're ready for your bigger bids down the line. Okay, moving along. So outcomes then, just to concretely, and I think Aisling was saying earlier to somebody that, you know, we're definitely happy to send you out our slides afterwards to all the people that have joined on this afternoon. And the outcomes are usually described as feelings, emotions, confidence, and there's usually an increase. So there's an increase in self-confidence, increase in self-esteem, changes in attitudes or behaviours. If you're working with people that find it very hard to manage their behaviour, you might measure things through increased ability to be able to actually engage with other people and to make social friendships in a way that they perhaps weren't before, to be able to maintain relationships more effectively. And these things will all come from that person themselves. Somebody giving you their opinion is always going to be much more valuable to you than getting that opinion from other people. The top one will be for them to report for themselves. The next step will be, somebody around them, or your volunteers or your tutors, or depending on the group you're working with. So, for example, when I was running a community centre, we used to have tutors that would go out to the local school, the run after school clubs, but also at the centre. And some of the children had behavioural problems, and they would have outbursts because they had lack of focus for attendance. They wouldn't be able to, focus for too long. So the tutors grew used to being able to work with those children and give them particular things that they would be able to do on their own. And then they'd come back to the group, and gradually over time, they were increased time that they could focus, increased time they would spend with the social group. And they also increased their ability to manage their own behaviour without many outbursts. So those kinds of things can be very relevant to younger people and children. You could always as well use measures of educational attainment. If you've got a class or a group that you're working with where people have start off, again, I've got an example. I'm working with a tenants group at the moment who are offering after school activities, but they also have somebody who does reading help. And so they help children that have come in with low reading age to increase their reading age. And that's a really nice one because it's a real concrete demonstration of change. Of course, when you're monitoring, you might find some things go in the direction you don't want them to, but that's useful to notice as well, because you can notice maybe if that's happening quite a lot, you can say, well, why is that happening? What's happening around that? Okay, any questions so far? Please do put in the chat box at any time and Aisling will pick it up.
Sure will. Nothing at the minute, Di.
Good. Okay, we're doing well then. Let's carry on. Okay. And so here we were going to have a debate now, and we're going to run it slightly differently because we're recording it for the website. But I was going to have a discussion with you about what your outcomes are. But if you'd like to put in the chat box now your particular area of work, I can rattle off for you some examples and ideas just as we go along here. We don't have to stop here for too long, but it gives you the opportunity to be able to say, you know, we're doing this with people, and what kind of outcomes can I expect for that? And we can design it around you.
Yeah.
Ashley, is
Yeah,
there
so
anybody?
please do share, folks. No obligation to, and I'm happy to remain. I'll leave your organisation name out. Somebody's put in digital. I'm not sure if that's digital inclusion. Is that perhaps an outcome?
So basically, that is a lovely one. I love that one because when I think of digital, unless you can give us a bit more information as you're going along, but say you were saying digital and it was older people, for example, then sometimes people can become quite isolated from their communities for different reasons. So, say for example, I'm going to choose the hard to reach group, which is men over the age of 60, let's say, begin to or can be quite hard to reach and engage. And if they don't have digital skills and you are being able to engage those people in digital skills and learn how to communicate, surf the internet, get in touch with their families who are not living so local, do Zooms, it increases not only their digital skills ability, but it also actually improves their quality of life through maintaining connections and with their friends and family through and that actually is a real direct benefit, basically outcome is happier, improved quality of life is very direct. You've got some more, Aisling,
I
tell me some
do.
more.
I do. Thank you for that one. And I so we have youth mentoring and employability for NEET, NEET, which I might be very ignorant. I'm not sure what that acronym means, but for 15 to
It's not
25 year
in
olds. Not in
education.
it. Okay. Oh, training.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Thank you. You
education,
know.
something and training. Yeah,
For
yeah,
15
yeah.
to 25 year olds.
Yeah, well, so we make an assumption, don't we, that young people are, digitally competent, which is not always true. And by you improving their skills, and particularly around employment, I mean, there is a very concrete outcome, which is actually, helping people into employment, which is a massive outcome. But you also might say, go a bit further and say people into employment, but also people into employment and staying in employment for 3 6 months, which is going to get their foot in the door, helping people to do meaningful volunteering placements helps them to improve their chances for employment. But their ability to be able to search and to be able to get interviews is an outcome in itself because they're actually being able to actually put themselves out there in a way that they wouldn't be. It improves their confidence, improves their self-esteem. These are all the outcomes that they would be hitting there. Just the fact that they're able to, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we criticize many people now for being on their phones for so much and so long. So you would say that that's about improving their relationships. I mean, it's interesting that now we're looking at helping young people to also pick up a phone and be able to actually have the social skills to be able to talk to people rather than texting, because that's getting lost for young people. They're losing that skill of being able to actually pick up a phone and actually think on their feet to be able to actually communicate and have a social connection. So one of the outcomes using phones and things like that can also be seen in a broader way, for social connections as well as education, improving their financial. I'm trying to think as a term, and it will come to me in a minute, but I just can't think of it this minute, which is about their economic viability. It's actually being able to get them the skills for tomorrow so that they can earn a higher salary in the future. And then the longer term impact is that you've got more people into employment, earning a good wage, a decent wage. Have you got some more for me?
Yeah, I do, Di. I've got two more so far. So we have somebody who works for Gate Essex, and they work to improve the lives of gypsies and travellers across Essex in terms of health, education, and accommodation. And then we also have somebody else working with the travelling community, helping them the community to register to vote and voting generally. So yeah, quite meaty ones there.
So go back to that first bit. It's the first bit, which is they provide.
Um, so to improve the lives of gypsies and travellers across Essex
Yes.
in terms of
Yeah.
health, education, and accommodation.
Health, education. Yeah. Health, education, and accommodation.
Yeah.
Right. So you would have different outcomes and indicators for each of those different areas. So on the health side of it, what you'd be doing is that you would be saying that get people to describe how their health is at this time. And it's also their ability to find and locate and source help with their health, if that makes sense. So not only are you looking at improving health and well-being, and that is both physical health and also emotional health and well-being, also helping through signposting, whether they access and are able to access for themselves, because that's a barrier for that community, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So if they are able to access, it's about then what happens. You're potentially increasing their health and well-being, their ability to be able to actually access those things themselves. So that's something in itself. But also you're enabling them to be healthier, emotionally, socially, and physically through a whole range of different things. So you might be doing work with them around eating, nutrition, exercise and fitness, as well as the basics, which is just accessing doctors, the frontline primary care services, which is a barrier and a hurdle for those communities. So all of those are a lovely load of indicators that you'll be looking at. So whether people have access in the first place and then whether they gain access is really key through your intervention. I don't know if that makes any sense to them whatsoever. The education side, you'd be having indicators around where people start and then what they gain. So education is a very clear-cut one that is more of a quantitative indicator, because they were here, they had no qualification, and then they did a food and hygiene course, which gained them a qualification. It's very black and white, that one. So that's great. Yeah. You've got another one there, which you said accommodation, which is life chances and all of these things improving the quality of life. So all of those three areas will improve quality of life. The accommodation side is really key, because if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about here, but Maslow's hierarchy of need says, we all need the basic things in life. We need, food, warmth, a place that we can call a safe space. So what you're dealing with there are some really key indicators, but they would all be different ones, with the accommodation side, the education side, and the health side. I hope that helps.
Yeah, she
Have
said
you got any more?
Said that's very helpful, Di. Thank you so much. And then yes, just one also about the Romany Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller community. I suppose helping with access to register to vote and to vote. So
exactly, having their voice being heard, being a voter. Yeah, exactly. So those, again, I think are hard and fast ones. So the indicators there are they're much easier for you to collect. So if people are not voting and then they are, and then they're able to do something, or registering with a GP and then they are, these are very, very, very important indicators that will be really key as part of your service. So whereas we were talking about the luncheon clubs, and that's a much softer indicators, and we'll talk about different methods in a minute. So this is where we start fitting together. So the lunch club with the numbers, and then the frequency that we see them, And then we're talking about the softer ones, about how it makes people feel, and also the nutrition and health crosses over there between those two different service providers. Because you might think that somebody who is coming to the lunch club, they may not have a hot meal at any other time of the week other than when they come to you. So it's not only a quantitative where they see their friends, they look forward to coming, you know, these are all the kinds of things, outcomes that we're trying to collect, yeah, about the happier person. But also with the health is a very key thing because we can measure it quite easily. And we can measure the softer indicators quite easily. So we'll get into that. Go to the next slide and let's start talking. They're going to start shouting at me in a minute, Aisling, if we don't start talking about those concrete things.
All right. Thanks all for your contributions. That's brilliant. I'll just move on. There we go.
Right. So I'm going to separate these out. So the monitoring is about what you collect, and we're going to set a baseline of the things that you're going to collect across the range of services. So you need to find some way of thinking, what is the easiest thing? You think, what can I collect regularly and easily? The evaluation side of it is completely different. That's about, okay, we've collected some stuff together. What sense are we making of it? You know, we've got to do that final bit. A lot of places find it hard to get the time to step out of their organization's day-to-day running to do the evaluation bit. So I'm going to plug that here today. But the monitoring side is obviously very important, because unless you monitor in the first place, you have nothing to evaluate. And the next one. So baseline data then, it could be age group, it could be gender, it could be postcode, could be all of those things that you see in front of you. It could be the softer indicators that we talked about, the qualitative ones, which is around emotions and behavior. Now, the difference between them, of course, is that numbers are easy to count on the day, whereas the softer indicators, we have to check in over a period of time. So we might want to say, when someone comes to the lunch club, you know, find out a bit about the person when they first arrive. Obviously not, you know, grill them to death, but, you know, actually just find out a bit about them and about their situation. And they may offer you something or they may not. And that may then change and be a comparable thing to go back to over a period of time when you're able to actually see any change. So when I say what kind of indicators are they on there, we're talking through and we're saying some of them are quantitative, some of them are qualitative. And like, for example, with attendance, you can say who's coming, how many people, and how often they come. You know, so you could say, I've monitored the lunch club, you get a new person managing it, and they don't seem to be as quite as it, let's say they don't seem to be as quite as effective as the last person you had. And then you've seen the indicators, the numbers of people reducing. And then you could say, right, okay, well, this time last year, we used to have regularly 20 people, of which 15 of those used to come more than twice over a period of time. And then now you're finding there's only 5 people coming, and it's 2 of those of 5 are turning up. So those indicators can also help you to flag up when there's problems around service provision and whether there's an issue. So we're not only doing it just to, you know, look at whether we're achieving our outcomes, but we're also looking at it to see how we're performing and how our service is running from period to period. If we gradually see a decline in attendance, we need to worry. What's happening? Yeah, what's changed? Any questions?
Anybody want to come through?
Or move on if that's
just,
okay?
Yeah, not just nada. Yeah, should we go to the next one?
Sure.
Lovely.
I wanted to say here a word about protection of data and data protection. So if you're working with and collecting information about people, the personal information, you want to keep some information separate, but instead of me going through that now, what I want to do is direct you to the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office, and it's got a It's got a website which we can look at if we have the time today. I'm not sure if we will have the time because we're going along now, but we come back to that. Basically, if you are collecting what's called sensitive information, so that's information about people's names and addresses and their age and their illnesses, if you're going into a level of detail, that would be called sensitive data. And you would then need to be quite careful about how you stored that information, where you stored it, and how you kept it, and making sure that people couldn't necessarily identify that person from finding it all in one place. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, if that's you and I'm describing your organisation, go to this organisation's website and find out more, because you'll need to do a little bit more about your data protection. Okay. Generally speaking, now we need to be doing a statement around data. So this is maybe another, if you're interested and you want to come back to another one of our series, maybe we can talk to Aisling about doing more around data protection. Okay. Because we do have a seminar that covers some of the data protection and the kind of notices, but it does take a little bit more of going into than just one slide, so we won't do it here. Yeah. Okay. And the next one. So in terms of the methods now that we're getting into the nitty-gritty, which ones do we choose? Okay, forms and registers are just some ideas for the basics. Sometimes people like to use the registration and people signing in and attendance because it also doubles up for health and safety about knowing how many people you've got in your building. You want to be thinking through, what do I put on that? I remember signing in the other day and somebody was asking for all my emails and everything on the actual sign in. And I was thinking, yeah, but everyone's going to come in and they're going to know all my information. So you do have to be a little bit mindful about, how you collect that information. And you could also do a force field analysis, which is that pros and cons, which we'll look at in a minute for those two. So let's not focus on that now. But questions and surveys, that's another one we're going to look at. So I won't focus on that just for the second. Interviews, informal or formal. So what I mean by this, I use interviews quite often when I used to run the community centre. Your lunch club people out there might want to use interviews. You won't call it an interview. You'll call it a welcoming session to the people that come to the lunch club. And an informal interview is where you're sitting there saying, hello, Janet, how are you? Would you like, I'm glad that you've come to our lunch club. This is what we offer, and you just find out a bit more about Janet. That's informal interview. You might then note that and say, and keep that locked away in the office, but you might want to say, Janet has got some things, health issues that we might need to help her with. And you might log that down, so that you know where you're directing her to. And you might say, given Janet a leaflet to, this, that, and the other, and organised for a volunteer to go with her because she was a bit nervous about going to the doctors because of travelling on buses and she thought she might trip. So, you might note that kind of thing because that is actually helping her to access those primary care services, and you are being very instrumental there about that. Okay, so that's an interview. A formal interview is where you're doing things like you are actually a service where, I don't know, whether you talk about whether it's CAB and people, you give certain people a form to fill in and they fill in certain criteria. I am ever so sorry. I've got my cat wailing here at the moment.
Right, the more the merrier.
Oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. So basically, a formal interview is sitting somebody down and actually asking set questions, and you ask everybody the same set question. Okay, so you don't veer from that question. That's much more of a formal interview. And then you compare that with the same questions that you ask them maybe 3 months later. So you might say to somebody, what are your hopes for coming to, maybe not the lunch club because that's an informal setting, but if it was a service where you're saying it's counselling and you're saying what kinds of expectations do you have, and then you ask them 3 months later whether that's changed or not, they will be able to actually tell you whether there's a difference. Self-assessment is where people are helping you to measure their outcome. So they're telling you how the service that you're offering them is actually making a difference for them. And it's a lot easier than you think. So for example, if you run a yoga group and at the beginning, somebody says to you, oh, my mobility is not very good. And, you know, and I also, you know, I'm looking for somewhere to come and make friends, or, you know, they might not even say that, but you might gather that over a period of time, they may come and tell you their mobility has increased, their flexibility has increased, and their social activities have increased because everybody goes for a coffee straight after. So that is a very informal kind of setting, but you've made quite a lot of change for that person. The outcome is, whatever way you look at it, is a happier, more active person. Yeah. Observation is where we assess through looking. So you could have, whether it's your volunteers are involved in doing some of the monitoring side of it, and I would definitely train up volunteers to be able to listen and to chat to people, and then they can tell you, you know, you can have a debrief at the end where you collect the information. So at the end of your lunch club, say Mavis is your volunteer, and she goes around talking to people about how they are, and then she can give you an update. You don't even need to say who it is, but you can actually just log that different people's responses from the session. You know, you're just saying, oh, right, you know, I suspect that many of you are running services that are quite informal, such as the lunch club, where you know all the people coming and you know the changes that you're making. So actually case studying, which is further down the list there, might be a really appropriate way for you to tell somebody's story. We're going to have a whole session just on case studies and that type of thing. So I'm not going to go into it in great detail today because you might want to join us again, hopefully. But I will describe what footfall is. Footfall is where you're trying to increase the use of a space. So, for example, if you had a community centre, and when I went to run this community centre, this is all real life examples for you. We were running 16 activities a week. And then by the time that I left that organisation, there were 40 activities going on at the centre and another 15 off-site. So that's purely, in terms of footfall, an increased footfall from 16 activities, the number of people coming through the organisation and coming through the different premises gives you an illustration. The outcome of that is that you've got a busier centre that's more vibrant and more integrated into the community. Diary logs. Diary logs are used by people who want to actually make a significant change. They want to change maybe the way that they're doing things, their behaviour, their moods. That's a common method used by people that are wanting to do something around emotional, social, or behavioural change. Any questions?
Nothing just now, Di. Thank you.
And the next one. So which ones are going to be for you? We have the next. This will help you to decide. So what do you want to find out? That's why I did the whole bit at the beginning of the webinar around what is your organisation meant to be doing? What is the change it's meant to be doing? What are the services that you... So it all has to tie in, doesn't it? What do you want to find out? Who needs to be involved? Yeah. Is it going to be costly? Do you have the right resources in place? How detailed do you need to be? Or maybe you're very light touch, because I imagine that some of you that are running the lunch club are sitting there saying, oh, this woman is giving me a headache. There's all these things I could be doing, but actually maybe you don't need to. Maybe for your service, It's as simple as training your volunteers, collecting who you get in terms of the numbers, and doing some case studies. You know, that might be the extent to what your resources and your time and energy that you can put into this. The thing is, the more you are able to put in, the more you're able to showcase what good work you do, and the more funding you're going to be able to secure. So it is a bit chicken and egg, really. Okay, the next one, please, Ashley. So this is called force field analysis. It's doing the pros and it's the cons of each of the areas. So before you throw yourself into just slapping all these different methods into place, I'd say, you know, just have a think with your committee, if possible, about what's the best way for you and what's the ones that are going to be most effective for you. So forms and registers, for example. The good thing about them is that they collect the number of people and they evidence different people. I'm going to show you something in a while we're going to do an evaluation, yeah, and we're going to pick out, I'll show you how I do it. On a signing in sheet, it's clear that there's, you know, if there's 10 hand signatures, there's different signatures. It's very clear. It's evidence that it's different people. A photograph is also going to show you different people, but that also needs permission, depending on what you're going to use it for. So the pros of forms and registers then are the numbers of people. It shows you nicely. Evidence of different people shows you nicely. It's cheap. It's a bit of paper. And it also shows you attendance over a period. The difficulties or cons about it then is it doesn't give you anything about the people at all. You can lose it, so it just can get lost in the wash unless you take a photo of your signing in sheets and put them digitally online or email them to yourself with your phone. So then you can throw them away or do whatever you want and you've got them on your system. And one of the cons is that sometimes people don't do it. So basically people just walk past and you don't capture it all. And the next one. So you want to do a pro and a con about some of these to see if they suit you. Questionnaires. The good thing is that good range of information, more depth, more likely to get some more outcomes rather than just numbers, the quantitative stuff. You could get more qualitative stuff from the questionnaires, better quality of information, and it's standardized. The difficulty, of course, is that everybody's fed up of filling in forms, haven't they? We get fatigued and we're fed up of it all. So, you know, takes time, it's more expensive to do. And also, which I think is really important, is that when we're asking people to fill in another form, it creates a barrier, because if they were going to tell you that they like your service, once you put something in front of them to complete, it already creates that barrier, because they then go, oh, what shall I say? Whereas if they were going to just spontaneously say, coming out of the yoga group or whatever it is, oh, I love coming here, or the lunch club, oh, I look forward to it all week, they're less likely to sit and write that down than they are to spontaneously say it. So this is the way to go in terms of, I'm not saying do questionnaires, I'm saying do a pro and a con for you about what's going to work for you. Don't put things in place that you think sound good, but that are not going to work, or it doesn't get you the right information that you need, or is so cumbersome or so time consuming that you won't be able to maintain it for very long. It will soon, you'll notice what works and what doesn't. And the next one, please, Ashley. Okay. I wanted to give you an illustration of an outcome star, because I wanted to introduce to you the more kind of the bigger end, if you like, if you wanted to get into something that was monitoring. I think where you were talking about the travellers community, working with the travellers community perhaps, and you're working with people in different areas. You were saying health education and accommodation, Outcome Stars might work for you because it can cover a whole range of different areas, and people can tell you or grade themselves, because it's also quite a visual tool that could be done quite soft touch and quite over a period of time. So how it works with Outcome Stars is that you would sit down with somebody, and there are different sorts of stars, and we can illustrate, we can send you some of these, or send you one of them that I've got as an example, and we can send you the link to the Outcome Star Place. That does cost to be part of them now. So some of these methods and systems do cost, but then if you are a bigger organization and you are wanting to invest in something a bit more sophisticated, this might suit you. So how this would work is that you talk to somebody at the beginning, and instead of on there, you can see this as feeling motivated, self-expression, confidence. So, you know, all these different areas, there are different stars for different areas. And so health, it might say, you know, a whole range of different things. And somebody would grade themselves. Oh, you know, I'd say I'm about a 5 here, instead of 10 being, you know, the most able I feel in that area. And then in 3 months later, they would actually grade themselves again. So it's about a grading and a discussion and working through with people in a bit more of a structured way. Yeah. Okay. And the next one, please. I'm not going to, yeah, that just describes what I've just told you, and it's there. Okay. And the next one, please, Ashley. So then we're on to evaluation. Before we do that, are there any questions around what we've been doing already? This is your last chance to talk about the monitoring side.
Someone just said yes, please, for evaluation stars, Di. So they like the sound of those.
The outcome stars, yeah.
Yes, so I'll capture people's feedback, and we can send things around to people, can't we?
Yeah, you can remind me. Remind me.
I certainly will.
Yeah. So, in other words, then the evaluation side, how often would you do it? So, I would say if you're a small organization, I'll tell you a good way of working for me. I'll take me back to the community centre. Let's do that one, because that was a good example. And people would, I would collect the quotes from people as they came out of classes and just write them down on cards. We also gave out things like complaints, you know, and people could give comments and complaints. And then I would put them all in a box, and I would tip them out quarterly and look at them all to look at what are people saying about what we're doing. Are there particular things we need to look at? I would also report that back to the management committee. So we're talking about putting in a system where all the day-to-day stuff gets collected up and gets reviewed, maybe quarterly, maybe every half year, or maybe annually. I think annually is too long, in my opinion. Quarterly sounds good. Sometimes people, if they're very, very busy, might do it once a month and just do it in bite-sized pieces and just look at what's happening. But looking at the feedback, making sense of it, and saying, do we need to change anything? It helps you run your services more effectively and in line with the needs of the people using it, but also then doesn't leave everything to the last minute, because many of our reports, whether it's to our funders, whether it's to our committees, those can be done month by month, and they accumulate over the months, so that actually by the end of the year, you've got your returns already completed, because you've been collating your monitoring as you go. To me, that's great use of time, because you're working much more leanly. You know, everything is used again and again in order to contribute to the bigger pictures. So, what happens to the findings? Okay, you take action. So you've monitored, you've said your lunch club, you've had the little comments, you've noticed people's comments. They say they don't like the sausages that you're giving out at the moment. And at least 5 people say that they don't like your sausages. They're still saying they like coming, but they don't like the sausages. So you're going to change your sausages, but at least you can also keep on track by saying people are still reporting that they look forward to coming. It's still improving. Their outcome is improved quality of life through the fact that you're providing a social activity and social connections and friendships, and you would circulate then that up to the committee to make any decisions. Okay. It goes into the evidence of need. The other thing that I was thinking about is waiting lists. That's what I didn't want to forget. So if you have inquiries, instead of us just saying, no, sorry, we can't do that, we need to collect the inquiries, because having a waiting list shows evidence of need of your service that you're not able to rise to now, but could if you had additional money, potentially. Any questions on any of that so far? Because otherwise what we're going to do next is we're going to look at evaluating some sheets that I've prepared earlier, like Blue Peter.
No, nothing coming through. Nothing coming through on the chat just now, Di.
Okay, so what we're going to do then as a last task, I think, am I able to share of where that can go? We did back at the community centre, there were 8 volunteers that we trained in not having leading interviews. So they were just listening. They were trained how to listen.
Yeah.
So those volunteers went out into the community, and over a 3-month period, they spoke to over 90 people around what affects their daily living, and they were given cards that we gave them to tick. It was anonymous, but it was ticking the different issues. So was it debt that worried them? Was it health? Was it, what kinds of things affected their day-to-day lives? And those people reported back that basically what affected their day-to-day lives was worrying about money, worrying about their health, and worrying about their partner's health. Were the top 3 things. There were other things as well, but the top 3 things were those things. So what we did with that was we condensed that into a report, and we've got 2 more sessions coming up. One's going to be all around how to write case studies and looking at case studies. So I want you to bring back, if you're going to come, bring back your case studies and send them to us, and we can either look at them together or come to the next session, which is talking all about reporting, because it's about how do we present all this stuff that we've been talking about today? How do we present monitoring and evaluation in a way that is going to be helpful and useful? So coming back to the next steps, we've got what are you going to do next? We're hoping you're going to come to more sessions and join us, and we've loved that you've come along today. We want you to revisit what you're using at the moment to see if there's anything that needs to change and anything we can help with. We want you to look at the systems and the structures and see not only what you're actually monitoring and about whether it fits your aims and objectives, but also how it's being reported to the committee, and whether we can help you with any templates and things like that that are going to be able to be useful for you. And then you could then devise a SMART plan, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed plan to move things forward. And I've done one for you earlier. So if you just go to the last slide there, Aisling.
Ta-da.
You might have an example plan for the year. So under the area, you're going to say, we're going to look at recruitment or look at monitoring and evaluation of the lunch club. Now what we do is we do this, 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 and this. In 12 months, we want to be better at doing X, 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 X. How are we going to do that? We're going to recruit a volunteer who's going to design something for us or whatever it is. And what are the indicators that are going to be there? So what's going to be in place at the end of that period to show that you've made that change? So you're going to say, we're going to have new forms in place. We're going to have new cards in place that people could tick, or comment boxes, or whatever it is, or we're going to do listening sessions or focus groups or all of those kinds of things. But this is a great plan for whatever you're doing in your organisation. So whether it's on monitoring evaluation or whether it's just doing an action plan for improvements for your organisation, you could use it. It's very ambidextrous. So I'm going to hand now back to Aisling to see if there's any things that you want to ask or discuss now. And I want to thank you very much for coming along today.
Thank you, Di. That was brilliant. And just one question, but I think you may have already just covered that. Somebody said, have we got a good way to present results? For example, Excel or create a graph and chart. But I think in our third session along, we'll be talking about reporting and presenting, won't we, Di? I think you mentioned that. So
actually, you've now just you've helped me now, because that session was going to look at like the big, reporting as in a big scale. So now what I'm going to do is go away from this session and do something smaller, so that we then, how do we get to this bigger one? Do we combine lots of smaller ones that we use all through the year that we fill in, and then we condense it to the bigger one at the end of the year?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Di. That was fantastic, Di. And thank you so much for everyone who came along and for sharing. It just helps shape the sessions, and it is recorded. You don't have to have come to this one to come to the next one. So please do share in your teams and your networks. Our next one is the 11th of December. I'm 99% sure I've got that right, but we'll be sending round invitations and reminders, and we'd love you all to come along again as the follow-on, but also to invite your team. Even if they've missed this one, they can catch it online, or they can just come along. And yes, I will gladly send out all the information that we've discussed. I'm just going to save the chat now. Slides, yes, people asking for slides, absolutely fine. And yeah, any other resources. But yeah, thank you. That was such a good session, and massive thank you to Di, but also thank you to everyone that contributed. And I think you probably all talked out now, so I'm going to say goodbye and thank you, Di, and hopefully we'll see you all on the 11th.